The 1960s regarding the drug trade in Colombia was dominated by marijuana production and smuggling through Mexico into the United States, and Colombia was not really that big on cocaine compared to the production of marijuana. Marijuana was also shipped from Colombia to Florida, however, cocaine consumption within the United States was steadily increasing in the 1960s. In the 1970s, a power vacuum emerged in the global drug trade with the mass arrests of the French Connection, which sharply decreased the French heroin production and trade in the early 70s. As a result, Colombian drug traffickers expanded the illegal marijuana and cigarette trade to get their piece of the void from the French. Pablo Escobar would go on to take advantage of Colombia's fertile and expanding marijuana trade, as well as the apparent smuggling and illegal trade of cigarettes. In 1973, there was a coup in Chile led by Augusto Pinochet, and his new regime conducted a heavy crackdown on Chilean drug traffickers. This incident caused some Chilean drug traffickers to either flee the country and/or immediately start to use different trafficking routes. This frequently resulted in Chilean traffickers setting their eyes on Colombia to use as a drug trade route further north. Cocaine production and consumption continued to rise in the 1970s, and the Medellín Cartel was founded in 1976, initially as an independent smuggling ring of Pablo Escobar and several other narco-traffickers, but it shifted towards becoming a collaborative drug cartel to maximize global shipping and production. The Medellín Cartel also produced cocaine and other narcotics to be shipped from Latin America to the rest of the world. This brings us to the activities of Klaus Barbie, aka the Butcher of Leon, who was an SS and Gestapo war criminal charged with crimes against humanity during World War II who was living and hiding in Bolivia. Initially, Barbie worked for cocaine kingpin Roberto Suarez Gomez of La Corporación, who eventually introduced him to Colombian drug traffickers. Barbie met with Pablo Escobar and other high-ranking members of the Medellín Cartel in the late 1970s, and agreed to arrange for security of Escobar's raw coca supply from its cultivation regions until it reached processing plants within Colombia. In exchange, Escobar agreed to fund Barbie's activities, as Barbie led a neo-Nazi group responsible for many disappearances within Bolivia. In Colombia, Escobar began a carrot-and-stick strategy of bribing public officials and political candidates, in addition to sending hitmen to murdering the ones who rejected his bribes, and this came to be known as plata or plomo, silver or lead, meaning money or death. The Medellín Cartel, as well as the Cali Cartel, both managed to bribe many Colombian politicians and campaigned for both conservative and liberal parties. Therefore, Escobar and many other drug lords were essentially pulling the strings in every level of Colombian government, because many of the political candidates received financial backing from cartels were elected. Escobar himself would also be elected to the Colombian Congress and claimed that all of his wealth came from owning a bike shop. Because, that definitely tracks. Dude with lots of wealth, bike shop, who would doubt that? The demand for cocaine within the United States skyrocketed in the late 1970s and early 1980s in what is known as the cocaine boom and crack epidemic. By 1982, cocaine surpassed coffee as the chief Colombian export. Within the U.S., there were violent street clashes fueled by the Medellín Cartel and narco-trafficking, such as the Miami drug war from 1979 to 1986, which resulted in over 1,200 casualties. The Medellín Cartel would also take part in narco-terrorism against Colombian political figures and the Avianca Flight 203 bombing in 1989, as well as the DAS building bombing. Various government connections to the Medellín Cartel included the Colombian government regarding elements that were under cartel control and when it was run by puppets. Panama under Noriega facilitated Escobar's drug trade, and he himself was a major drug dealer as Panama became a narco state, but this would end in 1989 with Operation Just Cause, which was the U.S. invasion of Panama, where Noriega was deposed and arrested. The Cuban government also aided the Medellín Cartel in the 1980s, as the Soviet economy went in the crapper and Cuba was reliant on Soviet subsidiaries. Cuban intelligence helped manage Nicaraguan operations, and the government agreed to using Cuba as one of the stopovers for the cartel. This was made with the knowledge of the Castro brothers having the younger brother, Raul Castro, have a meeting with various cartel and Nicaraguan officials. Regarding Nicaragua, in 1985, the DEA knew that pilot Barry Seal was a drug trafficker for the cartel, and they managed to make the pilot take pictures of the cartel's landing strips in Nicaragua. A prior DEA investigation showed that the cartel had the protection from the FSLN Sandinista Party to use Nicaragua as a sort of warehouse for the Medellín and Guadalajara cartel activities. And in March of 1986 on TV, a month after Seal was killed by the cartel, Ronald Reagan showed surveillance pictures taken of Seal's undercover mission that showed Escobar, Gacha, and the Nicaraguan government official Federico Volnug and several other men loading a plane with cocaine. So, the Medellín Cartel funded Barbie's neo-Nazi activities in the 1970s and dealt drugs with the Sandinistas. I guess the cartel was willing to look beyond politics as long as it meant drugs would continue to be sold. Allies of the Medellín Cartel included the Guadalajara Cartel, Los Priscos, Gallon Gang, the Extractables, which was a Colombian narco-terrorist organization that acted as the principal agent of the Medellín Cartel, La Cooperación, which was a Bolivian cocaine smuggling cartel, Oficina de Envigado, which was an enforcement and debt collection group for Escobar until 1992, when the group became a rival to the Medellín Cartel. The Spanish Galician clans of the Galician Mafia were also allies of the Medellín Cartel, as well as the governments of Cuba, Nicaragua, and Panama when it was under Noriega. After the political assassination of Luis Carlos Gallan by Pablo Escobar, the administration of Cesar Gaviria moved against Escobar and the drug cartels. Eventually, the government negotiated with Escobar and convinced him to surrender and cease all criminal activity in exchange for a very reduced sentence and preferable treatment during his captivity. Escobar was confined in what was his own luxurious private prison, La Catedral, and his influence within the prison allowed him to discover a plan and advance an escape and successfully leave in 1992, spending the remainder of his life evading the police. The incorruptible and paramilitary search block was created in 1986 by President Barco with the sole objective of apprehending Escobar and his associates. It was commanded by Colonel Hugo Martinez and reached over 600 members who received training from the Colombian Army and were specially selected to be impervious to police corruption from drug cartels. Throughout its mission, Search Block faced many obstacles, including a cartel spy within the group. There were claims that the Search Block collaborated with anti-Escobar vigilante groups such as Los Pepes and included vigilantism in the suspicious deaths of Escobar's subordinates. On December 2, 1993, in a shootout with members of Search Block, Pablo Escobar was killed. After dismantling the Medellín Cartel, the Search Block was transferred to Cali and located and shut down the Cali Cartel. Of course, just because the Medellín Cartel was dissolved does not mean that drug production has decreased overall. Plan Colombia was very successful at ending open, large-scale cartel activity within Colombia, but the global void in narco-trafficking has been filled by many Mexican cartels, which have brought violence to an unprecedented scale of escalation throughout the late 90s until the present day. This was just a basic summary of the rise, fall, and some of the highlights of activities of the Medellín Cartel, as there's a lot to the cartel. What aspect did you find most interesting? What elements did you think that I should have emphasized more about? And what other cartel and war on drugs aspects would you like for me to cover in later videos? Write in the comments below, and thank you for watching.